Rain lashed the empty street as Ethan stumbled forward, his small frame swallowed by the night, clutching a torn backpack as though it were the last piece of safety he owned. His breath came in ragged bursts, mixing with the sobs he fought to suppress, while the glow of a streetlight revealed bruises scattered across his trembling arm. He pressed himself into the shadows, hoping the world would not see his fear. Yet the silence around him felt heavier than the storm. Then, from the distance, a low rumble began to rise, steady and unrelenting, until the thunder of engines tore through the rain, headlights slicing the darkness like a promise of deliverance. A voice echoed above the roar, firm and compassionate. When the world turns its back on the weak, sometimes the most unexpected protectors rise up.
Ethan gripped the bat with uncertain hands, his gaze fixed on the ground as Coach Miller's voice cut through the field like a whip. Each command made him flinch, and though the other boys laughed nervously, no one dared to intervene. At the diner across town, Sarah balanced plates with weary precision, her smile practiced, though her eyes lingered on the faint bruises that crept beyond her son's sleeves. Guilt weighed heavily on her, yet her love was a constant flame, fierce even in exhaustion. Outside, Jake leaned against his motorcycle, the lines of his weathered face hardening as Sarah finally confided her fears. His voice carried both grit and tenderness when he said, "No kid deserves this. Sometimes it takes a family to fight back." And in that moment, the unspoken truth settled among them, that Ethan's pain had grown too heavy to face alone, and change would demand courage none of them could delay.
On the field, Ethan's body stiffened each time Coach Miller's hand landed too firmly on his shoulder, or his voice erupted in another tirade meant to humiliate. The other players averted their eyes, their silence a shield of cowardice that left Ethan exposed and alone. At home, Sarah traced the outlines of her son's bruises with trembling fingers, her frustration twisting into despair as she realized her pleas to the school had been dismissed as overprotective concern. Jake, watching the boy retreat further into himself, recognized the quiet breaking point approaching, the moment when a child's spirit might surrender under the weight of cruelty. The town's indifference was a wound as sharp as the coach's words, a reminder that injustice often thrives in the comfort of bystanders. Yet in Jake's clenched fists and Sarah's tearful determination lingered the possibility of defiance, a flicker of resolve that promised this suffering would not be allowed to continue unanswered.
The day arrived when whispers of Ethan's suffering no longer stayed hidden, and the silence that had shielded the coach began to fracture. Jake's call had summoned a force no one expected, and the distant growl of engines soon grew into a thunder that rattled windows and stirred unease across town. One by one, headlights pierced the gray horizon until a wall of steel and leather lined the street outside the school, their presence both intimidating and oddly protective. Children pressed against windows in awe, parents froze in uncertainty, and Coach Miller's bluster faltered as he faced the unyielding eyes of men who had chosen to stand for a boy they barely knew. Ethan stepped hesitantly from the school doors, his heart pounding as one biker knelt to meet his gaze, offering not threats, but a quiet assurance that he would never be left unprotected again. In that charged stillness, the balance of power shifted, and for the first time, Ethan felt the weight of fear lift from his small shoulders. In the weeks that followed, the grip of fear that had silenced Ethan slowly unraveled, replaced by cautious laughter as he rejoined the game he once dreaded. Coach Miller's absence was sudden and final, his authority stripped away after the community could no longer ignore what had been revealed. Sarah, though still wary from long shifts, carried herself with a newfound lightness, her son's healing spirit easing the guilt that had weighed her down. Jake remained a steady presence,
His rough edges softened each time he saw Ethan step onto the field without flinching, shoulders squared with a confidence long denied. The memory of that wall of motorcycles lingered not as menace, but as a symbol of loyalty, a reminder that protection can come from the most unlikely places. And as Ethan raised his bat beneath the watchful eyes of friends and family, it was clear that the boy who once hid in shadows had begun to reclaim his voice.
As the final echoes of the past faded, Ethan stood taller than his years, no longer defined by bruises, but by the quiet strength that had been restored to him. Sarah watched with tears of relief, knowing the boy she had feared was slipping away had been given a second chance at childhood. Jake's steady presence reminded them both that family is not always bound by blood, but by courage and loyalty when it matters most. The roar of motorcycles had long since stilled, yet their memory remained a testament that compassion can be as fierce as steel. In the end, the story was not about anger or vengeance, but about the power of standing for the voiceless, a lesson etched into every heart that witnessed it. Kindness costs nothing, but can change everything.